Are you a gay person who votes for either the left or the right? Well, if you are, and if you do, after this video, you might reconsider which party you vote for in the next election. Because as you'll see in this video, the tyrants on the left and the right hate homosexuals. Now, because it's not news to anybody that tyrants on the right are typically anti-LGBT, I'm going to start this video off with and have this video focus on the tyrants on the left who are anti-LGBT and the specific tactics that they use to secretly or passively attack the LGBT community after they have used the LGBT community to get themselves into power. But those passive-aggressive and hidden tactics will be covered in the latter part of this video. And the beginning of this video is just going to cover the brief history of anti-LGBT leftist tyrants, and why I believe all tyrants, even leftist tyrants who claim to be pro-LGBT, eventually become anti-LGBT. So without further delay, let's get this show started. And I couldn't think of a better leftist tyrant to start this show off with than the one and only Che Guevara. A number of years ago, every leftist had a Che Guevara shirt. This was about a decade ago. They all had Che Guevara shirts. Today, people still wear Che Guevara shirts, but those people are just incredibly ignorant. Because, as most people know today, Che Guevara was a horrible person. And not only was he a horrible person because he was a mass murderer, but he was also a horrible person for his treatment of gay men and gay women. Mostly gay men, though. If you aren't aware of these facts about Che Guevara, well, maybe this Huffington Post article is for you. It is titled, "Are You Gay? Che Guevara Would Have Sent You to a Concentration Camp." It says a lot in the article, but I'm just going to get to the point. So, Che Guevara, he was anti-gay, specifically anti-gay men, because there was this concept that he created of the new man, and he saw anybody who didn't follow his criteria of what made the new man, he considered them all counter-revolutionaries, and this was the case for gay men, whom Che Guevara referred to as sexual perverts. The article also mentions how Che Guevara helped establish the first Cuban concentration camps, and how the Cuban communist or socialist government, whichever one you want to call it, how they adopted mottos used at Auschwitz, which was the motto, "Work sets you free," and they changed it to "Work will make you men." And I include this fact because I just wanted to show how close the socialists and communists are to the Nazis. Which really shouldn't surprise anybody, because Nazi does stand for National Socialist. Not that it really matters, a tyrant is a tyrant whether they're on the left or the right. They're all assholes. And to prove that, we can go over to Wikipedia and we can look at LGBT rights in Cuba, and then look at pre-revolution Cuba and post-revolution Cuba. Both of them are very interesting. Let's start with pre-revolution Cuba. In pre-revolution Cuba, there were a few LGBT-friendly bars, such as the St. Michael, the Dirty Dick, and El Gato Torto in Havana. But Cuba had strict laws that criminalized homosexuality and targeted gay men for harassment. Socially, gay men were considered outcasts, and then it has this little snippet, and then it goes on to say that homosexuality was a component of the thriving industry of prostitution in Cuba, with many gay men drawn into prostitution largely for visitors and servicemen from the United States. Homosexuality also was linked to gambling and crime. So in pre-revolution Cuba, homosexuality was part of a black market economy that was probably mostly driven because of capitalism. But that doesn't really matter. That's just showing that even before the communists and socialists got there, when there were capitalists in power, there were still laws kind of outcasting or kind of shunning homosexuality. But things did ramp up in post-revolution Cuba. So in post-revolution Cuba, homophobia and labor camps during the 60s, and that's kind of what we talked about with our friend Che Guevara. And it goes on, with the profit motive eradicated by the revolution, the superficial tolerance of LGBT persons by the strongly homophobic Cuban society quickly evaporated. Immigration to Miami began immediately, including lesbians and gay men who had worked for United States films or had done domestic work for the native bourgeoisie. LGBT people who already had lived largely abroad moved away permanently. And we see the same thing happening in China. And now if you go back to Wikipedia again, you go to LGBT rights in China, you're going to find some interesting things there too. So if you go over to this second paragraph, it says homosexuality in China has been documented since ancient times. According to certain studies by the University of London, homosexuality was regarded as a normal facet of life in China prior to Western influence from 1840 onwards. That's strange. Why prior to Western influence? We're going to see a very similar thing with Russia in a moment, but let's continue with China. So if we go on and we move down to the next paragraph, it says homosexuality was largely invisible during the Mao era because homosexuality was pathologized and criminalized. In the 1980s, the subject of homosexuality reemerged in the public domain, and gay identities and communities have expanded in the public eye since then. It seems like they cut a lot of information out there. It just says it was pathologized and criminalized. Doesn't really go into the punishments. That's because people kind of write favorably about China, and they try not to have too much negative stuff out there. But as we see here, the only point that I'm trying to make is that when the communists came in, they criminalized homosexuality, much like they did in Cuba. And now let's see where else they did that. As promised, we're going to look at Russia now. So if you go to the LGBT history in Russia Wikipedia page, you'll find this. I'm going to focus on the second paragraph here. It says, in contrast to old Europe, ancient Russia had an open attitude towards homosexuality. Homosexuality has been documented in Russia for centuries. The earliest documented bans on homosexuality date to the early mid-17th century, and they began under this one czar, who is the czar who began the process of Europeanization and modernization in Russia. And during this guy's reign, he made it so that male homosexuals were put to death, and also states that female homosexuals are also put to death by burning. However, when the Russian Revolution overthrew the Tsarist government, they pretty much legalized homosexuality. But that didn't last long. It only lasted from 1922 to 1933. A nice 11-year hiatus of laws against homosexuality. And then in 1933, the Soviet government, under the leadership of Joseph Stalin, recriminalized homosexual activity with punishment of up to 5 years hard labor. And now to get to the point, which is, why do tyrants on the left and the right hate homosexuals so much? It was kind of hinted to us when we were going over Che Guevara and his new man idea, and how he viewed homosexuals as counter-revolutionaries. But it's also revealed to us in this Yugoslavia Wikipedia on the LGBT history in Yugoslavia. And it goes, after World War II, the repression of LGBT in Yugoslavia effectively began. LGBT people were labeled by communists as enemies of the system, and were also prohibited from joining the Communist Party of Yugoslavia. So, to stop dancing around the point, the reason why LGBT tyrants on the left and the right hate gays so much is because their systems depend on tax slaves. They depend on people giving birth to other people and providing them with new slaves in which to tax. So, since gay people are less likely to have kids, they're going to be fucking up their tax slave system. And the tyrants on the left are especially brutal to their gay tax slaves because the systems that come out of the left require more tax slaves to fund them. And now it's time to address the secret technique that they use to undermine the LGBT community when they don't have laws prohibiting LGBT lifestyles. And that technique is very simple. It's immigration. All they have to do is import people that are anti-LGBT. You see, the gay community has to realize that the importing of anti-LGBT people is a direct attack on them. And it's actually a brilliant idea for the government, for tyrants, because not only are they importing new tax slaves that are going to guarantee them future tax slaves, and these people do, they come and they have a lot of babies, okay? So they have a lot of tax slaves for the government. The government loves that shit. But then on top of that, the government also benefits from the community being divided. Now the community is divided, they're bickering with each other, and it's the perfect Hegelian dialectic. Problem, reaction, solution. You guys come in, they have a problem, there's a reaction from the community, and that reaction is always going to be, we need more government. Anyway, I'm going to end this video here. I don't think there's any more I have to say. There's plenty more I could say, but I don't think that there's any more that I have to say. You guys get the picture. I'll see you in my next video.
A community divided.
If the community has a faith-based ethos, then the schools should reflect that.
Well, isn't that okay to be gay?
In multicultural Birmingham.
It would be a massive step backwards in education to suddenly say we won't talk about different types of families anymore because it might upset some people.
Our choice! Our children! Our choice!
These parents don't want their children taught about same-sex relationships. It's a conflict between religion and education, a deep divide between parents and the school. Demonstrations have been going on for weeks.
This
was often difficult, but Monkey would not give up.
My son came home with some homework. When I opened up the book to help him do his work, it was a book called The Princess Boy, I think it is, which was about a boy who wants to be a girl, who wants to wear dresses, who wants to have tea parties. So basically like transgender, and it was very much saying that it's okay to be that way, which was alarming for me.
They're saying that it's okay to be a gay. It's okay to be gay in their beliefs, in their what they believe in, which we respect, because everybody's got right to live how they want to live, how they want their life. We're not imposing on them, but we feel that they are imposing on us.
This school in Birmingham is at the epicentre of a row over relationships education. The head teacher is adamant that nothing will change, despite protesters, including her own pupils, chanting for her to go.
The issue is we live in a country, we live in a city where there are many same-sex parents, and what we have to do with children is to educate about tolerance, respect, understanding not everybody's like me, not everybody's like my family, not everybody shares the beliefs I have or my family has, and that's okay, that's interesting.
I'm fighting for their children's rights.
This is where the protests began, 4 miles away at Parkfield Community School.
It's actually aggressively promoting them, giving it a positive spin and telling people that it is okay for you to be Muslim and for you to be gay. Mr. Moffat, shame, shame, shame.
Their anger is directed at Andrew Moffat, the school's assistant head teacher, who's openly gay and the author of a programme of lessons called No Outsiders. The classes include books about same-sex parents. His work on equality has earned him an NBE, but he told me he recently received a death threat and now has to defend the classes to parents at his own school.
I want to make very clear that No Outsiders is not sex education and never has been, and there is no reference to sex, to the sexual acts in No Outsiders. There's no books where there's bodies or bedrooms or No Outsiders is about community cohesion.
The school has currently suspended the lessons to stop the protests. Talks between parents and teachers are ongoing. But from September 2020, relationships education is becoming compulsory in all primary schools, and parents will not have the right to withdraw their children.
Aren't we lucky? That is what we're going to do, because we've got some extra.
This is a No Outsiders lesson being taught to 4- and 5-year-olds.
So our story is called Mummy, Mama and Me. Mummy picks me up, up, up. Mama pours juice in my cup.
The school in Cheshire is one of thousands already teaching that families come in many forms.
Mummy gently combs my hair. Mama rocks me in her chair. Mummy packs a yummy snack. Mama rides me on her back. Pop your hands up if you spotted any of the things that we said we like to do with our family.
During the discussion that follows, none of the children ask why there are 2 mums in the story.
None of the children have actually noticed, but if they were to, we would just discuss the fact that yes, there are 2 mums in that family, but some of our families are made up in different ways, so we would then talk about how their families are made up.
Danny is a gay dad whose daughter is a pupil here.
It gives people the freedom to be who they are, and for my child to talk about her dad's.
He's concerned about protests against the lessons in Birmingham.
It's kind of reversing all of the work that's happened in the UK for the LGBT community. It's we've took massive steps with making marriage legal and stuff like that. So this really is damaging, and it's kind of backtracking the UK.